All right, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, May 18th. I think everywhere in the world right now that's on this call it's Wednesday. So rather than saying good morning or good afternoon or good evening, happy Wednesday. Welcome to ACTO, and this is our monthly forum call for May. And we have ACTO, I just would love to give you guys the first preview. We have created a new vision and mission for ACTO, not published anywhere yet, so you get to hear it first. Our vision is a worldwide community that inspires excellence in coach training. And our mission, we cultivate best practices and integrity in coach training through connection, collaboration, and joy. So that is where you find yourself today, and welcome. This is our last forum call for this season. We have our conference, as you know. This is what this call is all about, is our conference coming up next month in Phoenix. So this is the last call of our series for this year, and we will return to our series in both Spanish and English in September. So thanks for being here on this last call. We have 3 short presentations today, all of whom are going to be speakers at our conference coming up in June. So hello to Suzanne Zeman, who will be one of our speakers, Nancy Smythe and Sharon Eakes, or Smith, welcome, and Julie Perkins. So welcome to them all. And I would just love to introduce you to Lynn Menke, who is the chair of our conference committee this year, who have done a wonderful job putting this conference together. And she's also our president-elect for ACTO. So Lynn, if you would like to say hello and say a few words.
I would. I'd like to say welcome to everyone. And if you haven't signed up for the conference, do it now, because we're going to have a lot of fun. And just to give you all an update, we have about 85 people registered for the conference. It's the most ever for an ACTO conference. People coming from many different countries, not just the United States. So we're very excited about that. We have 3 full days of speakers. We have 10 presenters that will be presenting in 5. So you get a choice this year of who you want to go hear. And I know some people always say, how can I choose? Well, you know, that's what life is all about, choices. So you get to choose. We also have 2 great keynotes. Our opening keynote is Linda Miller, who has been in coaching like forever from the start, and she's with the Ken Blanchard Association. So she'll be welcoming us. And our closing keynote will be Jennifer Conweiler, who has done a great amount of research with introverts and extroverts and how they work best together, and how as educators do we incorporate them in our coaching. What are some of the challenges we may find with extroverts and introverts, and how are we going to bring that all together? And then we're going to have a super session that is going to be exciting, backed by popular demand, actually, is Peter Redding. And he presented last year and everybody wanted to hear more. So he's going to be doing a 2-hour presentation. And then we're going to have some fun too. You know, lots of time to get together. We're going to have some open space dialogues, which is where what's kind of rising to the surface that you want to dig into deeper. So it's going to be hopefully something for everyone. So welcome and join us, please.
Great. Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome.
So let's just dive in. We got a lot of really interesting stuff to cover today. So I'm going to start by introducing our first presenters. Nancy, is it Smythe or Smith? You're on mute.
It's Smith. Thank you.
Okay, so Nancy Smith and Sharon Eakes. And together they're known as the 2 wise women. Sharon and Nancy generate fun experiences while creating powerful breakthroughs for their audiences and inviting people to create rewarding personal and professional lives. Together they have authored the book Chocolate or Lunch: How Choices Impact Relationships. Nancy holds a MCC credential in the ICF, and she apprenticed for 4 years with an Aztec medicine man, learning to see what's invisible to our eyes. So Nancy is a director of training for Prescott College's Integrated coach program and an invited participant in Conversations Among Masters, which is actually going on right now in Las Vegas, Support TED, Planetary Dance, and other collaborative projects. She's a coach, speaker, and a poet. Nancy cultivates experience, understanding, and expression of peace-filled solutions. Her presence is delightfully tranquil and powerfully transformative. Sharon has a master's degree in psychology. She's a therapist and a board-certified coach. She is dedicated to making complex ideas understandable. Her essays are collected in a book called Fresh Views on Resilient Living. Sharon has presented at many national conferences and is an invited TV and radio guest. Sharon's energy is always directed towards fostering balanced, joyful lives, helping people make meaningful contributions in their worlds. Sharon has the presence of a wise woman wrapped in a spirit of lightness. So over to them, talking about igniting whole presence, being the fire of transformation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. Sort of funny to listen to it about yourself, yeah. So, we're going to ask you to answer some questions, so we may do well to have you unmute so that we could just have a little dialogue in the beginning of our presentation. So,
And they can unmute as they ask as well, which might.
That's true, which might be just fine. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So one of my first questions to everyone is what do you love about training coaches? What excites you about that?
This is Kathy Liska. I think what I love the most is those aha moments or light bulbs going off for people.
Thank you, Kathy.
This is Renee. What I love is that when you're working with coaches, they so want to help people and they're motivated. It's just a very positive energy and conversation.
Thank you.
I love knowing that for every coach that I train, hundreds of lives are going to be impacted versus just the one.
That's awesome, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The ripple effect, huh? Yeah.
And this is Kathy Harmon, and what I love is seeing people start from they have no clue to suddenly, well, not suddenly, but over time, developing into very powerful and helpful and motivated coaches.
Love it.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a quick path almost too, isn't it?
What I love is the hunger for learning that coaches have. So it makes the training really a delight.
Yes.
Those are great responses. So the next question is kind of on the flip of that. What bugs you about your students ever? Like, I'm thinking we do training on the phone, and sometimes I can just tell when they are multitasking. A little frustrating.
When the toilet flushes.
Yeah, absolutely. Other things get in the way and be a little irritating.
Coaches who are resistant to doing their own work, but expect their clients to do it.
Yes.
People who procrastinate, I guess, don't show up for appointments, and they really, really want to be a coach, but they're not 100% committed to show up when they need to be showing up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's those excuses they give that bother me. You know, it's like it becomes this little litany of why I can't.
I think one of the challenges sometimes is you'll send them the information, and instead of reading it, they just keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, like not connecting with what you're giving them.
Right. Or those students that can't leave their egos at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And those who show up and say they're stuck, but really don't make the effort to get out of stuck.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some investment in the stuff.
Give me the formula how to do this right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me the aspirin. That's the one I want to take.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Think of a fairly recent training session that you had where you felt it needed to be improved or things didn't go quite right. Now we're thinking of a training session.
So when you think about that and you know that it didn't quite go the way you wanted to, how do you evaluate it? Are you looking for how well you delivered the material, or the receptivity of the people, or
If they've had a change in awareness, has there been, what is your way of evaluating?
I know for me, sometimes there's this awareness that my energy level really makes a difference. And so I've gotten to the point now where I require myself to stand, even though I'm teaching online. So I have a desk that I can raise up, and I stand up and walking and gesturing to myself. It comes across in an online training.
Thank you.
interesting?
How else do some of you evaluate your sessions?
In line with what Kathy just said, I do a lot of face-to-face training, and I also do the online training. When I see people yawning, then I check in with myself to see, okay, am I losing energy too? In which case, that enables me to make some kind of a shift, the energy back.
It's sometimes frustrating to me that in a training session, unlike a coaching session, I feel like I need to get them somewhere. And if they don't go the way it's supposed to go, like I can't lead the conversation the way it's supposed to, which is opposite of coaching. It feels like I am modeling something that I shouldn't be. Having an agenda, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in thinking about this whole question of how do you evaluate that, here's another way to evaluate a session. And we're going to be focusing on presence in our program. So when you're thinking about that, what are the markers or some of the markers of your own presence? How do you evaluate your presence? And some of you have spontaneously mentioned them already, when you feel your energy going down. But what else do you use to sort of evaluate?
My level of curiosity.
Yeah.
My level of boredom with myself.
The energy and engagement of the students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Oh, great. So let's for a moment gauge our presence by using this measure. So starting from the bottom up, think about your presence as maybe insignificant or moderate or outstanding or maybe even extraordinary. And go back to that training session that maybe hasn't gone well, looking at this spectrum. In that session, how high on the scale was your presence during the session? Was it at insignificant, moderate, outstanding, or extraordinary? Where would you put yourself on the scale? And why would you put yourself there?
Moderate, and I was physically exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
To moderate to insignificant.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't that's what we need, to be honest with ourselves?
What's interesting is when you said that, and you said physically exhausted, when you're physically exhausted after a class, does that mean you were more present as compared to before a class? And, you know.
That's an
Great
interesting
contemplation.
Boy, that is an interesting question. We ought to just ponder that.
I actually use that as how energized I am by the end of the class. Because usually I'm,
That's what I'm
when the time comes to be done, it's like, wait, I want to do more. And then I know it's been a good class.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So then what do you think your presence was during that class?
Probably pretty high in those classes where you just, the whole time, I just feel like giggling. It's so much fun.
I love that description. That's really good. So we want to tell you a story about a really terrible accident. It happened in Utah a couple of years ago in the city, where there was a bus accident and a woman was pinned under the bus. There were many, many responders there to try to free her. And one police officer came and crawled under the bus with her. And he found her there conscious, breathing, and really, really scared. And so he said to her, "I'm going to stay here with you." He held her hand, actually. And he said, "I'm going to stay here with you until we can both leave." And that connection was huge to both of them. They later stayed connected. There were enough people working on freeing her that his role was simply to be there with her.
So thinking about this connection between the woman and the officer under the bus, let's think about it as a metaphor. And how powerful in a training.
Could you repeat that question, Nancy? Your reception cut out.
Okay. And thinking about it as a metaphor, how connected are you with your students during a training?
And that's not a question you have to answer right now. It's just one we want you to think about. And to consider, what if that intense quality connection became the norm? That level of presence was what you brought to the training.
And what if the story of this officer's presence is a good description of whole transformative presence?
It may also be useful just to think of what holds you back, whether it's self-focus or busyness or boredom from doing it many times, or
time constraints.
Yeah.
You know, I can be Miss Busyness, you know, and so I've got so much I've got to get done in the course or that particular day. So think about, for you, what are some of those things that hold you back from being that present? What is occupying your awareness?
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions that comes up for me is, and if I'm fully presence of the student makes a difference too. So what can I as a trainer do to really let them know how important that is and more fully engage them? So obviously we all test out different things. I'm curious about what else am I missing?
It's a great question. And it's part of what I think we'll be talking about in our ACTO presentation, which is called Igniting Whole Presence, Igniting It, Being the Fire of Transformation. Because that's true. The first step is to model it. And what's the invitation? How do we really invite that ignition? So
some of the things we're actually going to be looking at in the conference is how real are we? You know, how are we really showing up? Are we afraid of silence, or do we allow creativity in the room to blossom? Or do we need to have the right answer or an answer if someone asks a question? Or can we allow the question to really allow everything in the room to open more? What is our presence?
And how permeable and transparent do we allow ourselves to be? Do we consider that we need the training sometimes more than our students do even? Possibly.
And what if the state of our heart is even more important than what it is that we're delivering? That what it is that we know and that we want to convey to them?
I think I love that question. I'm gonna leave it floating in the air. We need to move on to our next presenter, but thank you so much. Great job. I certainly got a lot of questions I wrote down for myself, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, as we said, this is a taste test. So, more of that at the ACTO conference in Phoenix. Come on over. So, our next presenter, thank you, Sharon and Nancy, is Suzanne Zeman, and she's going to be speaking with us about using the wisdom of the body for teaching and coaching. Suzanne is a published author, designer and leader of university leadership programs and teleclasses for coaches, managers, and entrepreneurs. She studied and worked with both Fernando Flores for Newfield for 10 years, as well as the Strossi Institute for 10 years, coaching managers and executives at companies such as NASA, Texas Instruments, Twitter, Yahoo, and Condé Nast. In her book, Listening to Bodies, a somatic primer for coaches, managers, and executives, she teaches coaches how to do somatic work using voice-to-voice telephone interaction. She brings 30 years of business experience to her work as an executive and business coach. Her expertise includes developing executive presence, building and sustaining high-performing teams, and increasing sales proficiency for non-sales professionals. She provides clients with somatic practices and ways to design life with purpose, grace, strength of character, and power. She is passionate about making somatic practices available to as many coaches as possible in her lifetime, believing that we connect with each other more deeply and have greater compassion for each other when we are using the wisdom of our sensations, feelings, and ability to extend and expand our awareness. So, here's Suzanne.
Thank you very much, Hallie, and hi, everybody. Most of my work is on the phone. And when I started studying somatics, I was actually in a life transition myself from doing a lot of consulting and traveling. And I found that I needed to redesign my business model to be sustainable as I age and continue to work, which I'm now 71 years old, have absolutely no desire to retire. And working on the phone from my home is something I can do until I can't pick up the phone anymore. So that's how I designed my work. When I started studying somatics, I was really curious, could I do somatic work on the phone? And as I continued in my studies, I found that my own sensitivity and what I was feeling from my clients on the phone is what would allow me to connect with them deeply, feel what they were feeling. And so I also developed some ways to train the coaches that I was working with to increase their own sensitivity and somatic awareness in order to be able to bring that wisdom to their client. Some of the practices that I use are practices that many of you probably already know: body scanning, levels of breathing, voice, and using the awareness of voice in the body, and then working energetically to open length, width, depth, and how that's all connected to the mood that we find our clients or students are in, and how to work with those. So in my presentation at the conference, I'll actually be demonstrating a lot of these fundamental principles. So just as an example, if you close your eyes for a moment, if you're comfortable doing that, notice right now what's happening in your own body so that you can use that as a baseline for the next interaction that you have. So you may notice some constraint or contraction. Often, simply by bringing awareness to those places, they begin to release. One of the principles of somatics is that energy follows awareness. So if you bring your awareness, for example, to your shoulders and your upper back, simply by bringing your awareness there, you may start to release some of the tension that you may be holding. Or if not, your awareness of your own baseline will allow you to distinguish between what's yours and what you're picking up from your client. So imagine that you're working on the phone, and I'm now coming to the phone either as a student or as a client, and I'm going to demonstrate something that I want you to feel in your body. So I just came from a meeting that was very long, and I'm sorry that I'm late for coming to our call, and here I am, and I want your help. So notice when I did that, what happened in your own body and where you felt my voice. What I did was raise the level of my breath. I brought my energy up. And in doing that, I had to constrict my throat. My voice got constrained as well. And how did that feel in your own body? I'd like to hear some comments about what you noticed, what you observed.
This is Kathy. I noticed a tightening in between my heart and my throat.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
This is Nancy, I felt it at the top of my head.
Uh-huh, good.
I left the rest of my body.
Yeah, great. So
I felt it in my gut.
good. And what did you feel in your gut?
This is kind of a tensing.
Mm-hmm. Good. So all of that is very relevant because I'm coming to you and you're feeling these things in your own body. So when I'm working with clients or students, I ask them, what are you noticing right now in your own body? And checking what I'm feeling and sensing. So I'm bringing their awareness to their bodies and helping them see how they can use that awareness and wisdom for the actions that they're taking. So for example, if someone wants to increase their availability. If they've been told that they're too focused and not available, or they're closed off, or too concerned with themselves, or they're not listening. All of these goals for learning can be addressed through the wisdom of the body. And what we found is that when someone can observe in themselves their body reactions and what they're sensing and feeling, the transformation that can occur with the practices that we can provide for them are huge and lasting, because all of the conversations that we have, and even our thinking, of course, happen in our body. So it surprises me that many of the coaches that I work with and train, although they have the conversational skills, they don't necessarily have the wisdom or use the wisdom that's already present for them in being able to address these issues with their clients. So not only do they benefit tremendously, they being the coaches that we're training, in understanding and using the wisdom of their own bodies, but then bringing that to their clients. I think, Hallie, as you said earlier, it increases our ability as trainers and coaches to affect not only the people that we're teaching and training, but everyone that they're coaching as well. So body scanning is a very fundamental practice, and in my session I'll lead people through about a 10-minute body scan that I use to increase our sensitivity and our awareness. I will also talk about levels of breathing and demonstrate those. So when I did that little demonstration, I brought my breath all the way up, which constrained my throat to some degree and also brought my energy all the way up. So Nancy, when you were feeling that at the top of your head, that was very appropriate. And at the same time, someone who felt the contraction in their belly and gut and midsection, that also was appropriate. And we can use what we're sensing and feeling to have our clients notice their own level of breathing. High-level breathing, even though it does constrain the voice to some degree, is useful to us on occasion as coaches and trainers so that we can connect with the people that we're either coaching or training where they are. So it's possible, for example, I'm going to do this now, to bring our breath up and to feel a higher level of energy. But if we're grounded and our feet are connected to the earth, we can still do this successfully in a way that connects with our clients or students. And then through our breathing, as I'm doing now, dropping my energy, dropping my breath, help them connect to a deeper level of awareness and a deeper level of breathing, which then allows their voice to come more deeply into their torso. So notice as I dropped my level of breathing and brought my voice into my torso, what happened for you in terms of your willingness to connect with me? Did you feel yourself moving more closely? Did you feel yourself relaxing more? Any comments or observations about that?
It definitely felt that. When you were breathing up here, I was like, oh, you can get to the other part. And then definitely was more engaged. It was like, okay, she's more. And I tend to be a very mellow person. So my question about that is the part where you say meeting the client. I don't think I often do that like that. Maybe I do unconsciously, but that I tend to stay in the mellow range and have them come to me. But I
Yeah.
like the idea of meeting them where they are and sort of leading them that way. But I'm not sure what you would say about the effectiveness of either of those.
Well, I use that in a lot of my client work because I work with many people in high tech in this area. So in those environments, people are moving very quickly. They come to the call with their breathing high, their energy high, either that or they're so exhausted that I then like to drop back to meet them where they are. Often that level of exhaustion, for example, is accompanied by a certain mood. It might be a mood of resignation. And then we look at the shape of their body in that mood. And in my presentation, I'll also talk about the shapes of bodies in moods. What I find about moods is that often people identify with their mood, like they'll say, oh, that's just the way that I am. But if you can work with them on how they're sitting or how they're standing or the shape of their body, you can actually help them to become more open, to become more present by extending their energetic structure. I'll also talk about the dimensions of our energetic structure, our length, our connection to the earth and to the sky. In many ancient traditions, we human beings are seen as the connectors from heaven to earth and earth to heaven. So how do we help our clients open to that capacity and capability? We'll also talk about width, opening in the horizontal direction, which is more of a social dimension. How do we open to hold all of the communities of people that we're coaching? How do we train our coaches to open to that dimension, which is very powerful also when we're presenting? Being able to open to hold the entire space while we're also connecting with each individual. How do we do that? And how do we help our coaches be more open to that capacity? And then the third dimension of depth. How do we bring everything that we've learned from our history and our past through to how we're inventing and designing our future? Then I also have some practices for opening our entire energetic structure to feel our own boundary so that we can be both more open and available and yet distinguished so that we're not taking on the energy or what our clients or the coaches that we're training are releasing. And I found that oftentimes if we're too, what's the word? I'm thinking of like a membrane that is permeable. If we're too permeable or too vulnerable, we can easily take on the energy that's being released in a room or with our clients or coaches, especially when we're working at a very deep transformative level. So it's very important for us as teachers or coaches to have our own boundary be clear so that we can continue to be connected deeply without taking on what others are releasing or giving off. So these are some of the practices that I'll be demonstrating and working with in my presentation.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it already.
Good.
Yes, that boundary part, very, very, very useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments or observations? Thank you for that, Hallie.
I can't wait to hear more. Looking forward to that.
Same
Good.
here.
And we'll be practicing. So I'm a big supporter of practices, and hopefully can bring some new practices to all of you that you'll be able to use directly in your teaching and training and also with your client work.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
All right. So we have yet another presenter today. Thank you to all the three of you who have gone so far. And we also have with us today Julie Perkins. Julie will be talking to us about instructional design for coach training, ensuring transfer of skills. So Julie is an ICF certified coach, change facilitator, teacher, instructional designer, public speaker, author, and radio show host. A possibilities thinker, she is passionate about the field of coaching and is relishing in leveraging her instructional design expertise in the coaching realm. Her conversations of change center around conscious choice and what it can create, creating ease with change, and how judgment impacts all facets of your life. She supports coach training organizations to up-level their programs so that they are instructionally sound and increase their skill building potential. For her, this is a way to not only grow and build the coaching profession, but also create more avenues for developing new coaches. So Julie, take it away.
Thank you. And how did I get so lucky that I don't think my presentation is opposite any of the other presenters so that I get to go to theirs too. So really great. So that's awesome. So thank you everybody for being here. And I have a question. I wonder how many of you know what andragogy is? Andragogy. Anyone?
I'm looking for a
Kathy.
way to raise my hand.
There's two Kathys. There's Kathy with a K who's on video who wants to say something, and then I'll get Kathy with a C.
Isn't that how it's training either adults or children?
Yes, adults. Great.
Oh.
And Kathy with the C. Anything to add to that?
No, I'm there with you.
Yeah, the art and science of training adults. And over the years, that has been around for a while when Malcolm Knowles put that forward a couple decades ago. Over the years, we've seen the gap continue to decrease between how we're training adults and how we're training kids because there's a lot of great principles. But what I'm going to do in my presentation is tell you a little bit more about some of those key characteristics of adult learners so that we can bring that into focus. And as we know, anything that we focus on draws energy to, as we've already heard from a couple of our other speakers, okay? So andragogy, I'm going to give you a little introduction to that and talk to you about one of the key tenets of adult learners is that they come with experience. They already have life experience and they have expertise. So they are coming into your classrooms, whether they are virtual, on the phone, in person. They are coming into your classrooms with that already on board. They're coming with that knowledge and some level of skill from other realms. And how do we take that and leverage that and move that forward into new learning and to building new mental models and new skills so that they can exit your classroom and have that jump start into the actual job of coaching. So that's really the bottom line of what we're going to explore. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine. Her name is Addie. So we're going to meet Addie. Anybody know who Addie is? Any instructional designers? Deborah. Was that a yes or no? That was just a sign. Okay, awesome. Addie, I'm going to introduce you to her. Addie, A stands for analysis, D stands for design, the other D stands for development. I stands for implementation, and E stands for evaluation. And I've already heard that mentioned about how do you evaluate your training. And that typically is where we end up going. We start at the point of, how am I going to implement this? I know that I have a webinar platform, and that's how we're going to launch that and deliver this. So that's implementation. And then afterwards, I'm getting some feedback, so how am I going to do that? A lot of my experience in coach training comes from the second D of development into the implementation and into the evaluation. Because that's where we know how we have to launch it. Because training time is coming, right? I've got to get my trainer notes together. I've got to get this handout prepared and put out for them. And then I've got to get there, show up, and then I got to figure out how I'm going to make it better for next time. So what if I could give you some tips about how to analyze your audience, keep them in mind, and do some design techniques so that we can talk to those novice learners. And that's what we'll explore in more in depth. Because as coach trainers, we have our own experience and we have our own expertise that we are bringing to the table. And we have learned that over repetition, practice, lots of experience. And because of that, we have gone the shortcut route. The expert path is the fast pass at Disneyland. You get to go to the front of the line. You know how to do that. And what would it take for us to remember that we're training novices? How do we take that expertise that's up here and in our bodies, as Suzanne was saying, how do we take that and break that down into something that is more manageable for a novice learner? So after you meet Addie, I'm going to talk to you about SMEs. What are SMEs and how do we use them? Does anybody know what a SME is?
Yes.
Yes.
Subject matter expert.
Awesome. Awesome. The first time I taught somebody about a SME, they were like, what? Did you say what? A Smurf? I said, no, not the little blue cartoony guys, a SME, subject matter experts, of which you all are. Being a part of ACTO, you have subject matter expertise in coaching and in your specialty areas, okay? So again, the idea of SMEs is that they have all of these mental models and this schema, and we're going to talk about the science, the neuroscience, and the cognitive psychology behind how we learn, how we retain, how we encode, and how we retrieve information so that we can leverage that for our students and design more practices that are going to meet their needs as novice learners. So that's this training in the brain that I have here. We're going to look at working memory and how we can use that, long-term memory, and coding strategies, so we can build these mental models. Okay, so now here comes the first drawing. So go easy on me. Mental models. All right. One there on this one side here, this is my file drawer, my 3-drawer file cabinet here. And what that is symbolizing is the way that we set up in our brains those file folders, that filing, those mental schemas, and how it's different between novice and experts. And over here, this is my paint scaffold. So my little paint can, my paintbrush, and the scaffolding here is how you stand up on that and use that to paint a building, or when you're actually constructing a building. And scaffolding is another technique that we use for novices. So instead of saying, here are the tools, and loading them up with all of them and say, now go build and paint the building, we're actually going to structure some scaffolding so they can start in certain areas, build up and build upon from there. So I couldn't see your faces while I was showing the graphics. So I'll have to look at the recording and see how many laughs we got about my little little graphics there. But thank you for indulging me. And part of what we can talk about for delivery is different ways to actually deliver with analogy, metaphor, visuals, graphic, energy, all of the things that have been mentioned already in some of the other presentation. So thank you, Catherine, for, for acknowledging my graphics. I like to color. I'm a kid at heart still. And what would it take for us all to have that playfulness in our trainings? So I want to pause for just a moment to ask if there's any questions so far. I do have one more concept I want to present, but how are we all doing with the idea that you can actually transfer your expertise from the classroom to the job of coaching in different ways for your students?
I just have a question. You started by talking about how we're teaching adults and they come with expertise and experience and skills. And then you were referring to them as novice learners. So one of the things that I've heard about with teaching adults is that often it can be challenging to get them to share because they're experts and they don't want to be wrong.
Right.
So sometimes there's a lot of reluctance and resistance to have adult learners sharing for fear. It feels very vulnerable for them. So
Right.
I'm sort of looking at the scaffolding, thinking about, I'm very visual, so thank you for the scaffolding model. This is probably a much bigger question than you can answer, but are we relating to the noviceness or the expertise primarily in our training?
Yeah, so the novice piece is that they're new to coaching.
Okay.
Okay, so that they're novices in that realm. And the expert piece is they're experts in life experience. And so that piece that you're talking about, Hallie, that willingness to be a lifelong learner, and what we can do to invite them in by using ADDIE, some instructional design techniques, might be more of the invitation for them to drop their barriers and to say, okay, yeah, it's all right here because I'm not going to be expected to make this leap all by myself. There's a bridge here that's being built for me with scaffolding and railings on the side and a setup of where I just need to file all my stuff. Does that help?
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else? Cool.
It's Lynn. Just to tag on to that, I get so many students that, they think they should know it because they're an adult. That because I am an adult, therefore I should know this new material. I don't know how they're going to know it, by osmosis or what, but it's like I should.
Yeah. And I've often found that by doing this, it actually relieves that pressure, lets a little bit of steam out of the pressure cooker there. It's like, oh, I don't, and I'll have practice and lots of practice and help and support and repetition and all the things that we know about learning. Oh, thank you.
I'm curious as much as anything, you bring up ADDIE and some other things. How many people are familiar with IACET? The International Association for Continuing Education and Training. And that's curiosity as much as anything.
You have some nodding heads, Kathy.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you see that there's people raising hands and nodding heads?
Yeah.
We don't see you, but I don't know if you can see us.
Yeah, no, I can see you. Or some of the faces at any one time. So thank you.
Yeah, and there's organizations, there's other organizations. There's also ATD, which used to be ASTD, and there's also ISPI, which is a performance improvement organization that had its roots in training and instruction. And so those are the organizations that I grew up in. And I thought I was done with instructional design when I became a coach. And now I just find, wait a minute, how cool is it that I get to add all my training stuff into the realm of coaching and leverage it there? And work with coach training schools and executive coaches who are designing their programs, who want to get out there but are not sure how to package that in a way that's instructionally sound. So I'll leave you with one last concept. It's called the near versus far transfer type of tasks. And in the conference, you can come and hear me talk about near transfer and far transfer. And that's one of the cognitive psychology principles, in that there are certain tasks of coaching that tend to be more near transfer, where you can tell them how to do it step by step. You can demonstrate it for them, and they can practice it, and then they can usually make the short bridge from the classroom back to the job of coaching. That's called a near transfer task. The far transfer tasks are those tasks that are run by guidelines that just provide a boundary for which they can work in, but there are many different ways, acceptable ways to get there. And those require a little more design work, a little more thinking through about how you're going to train them. And I'm really excited to share more with you about that at the conference.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you to all of our presenters for being willing to reveal just a little taster of what's to come at the conference. And I look forward to seeing all of your faces in Phoenix in a month or so. And again, this is our last forum call for the series this year. And we look forward to seeing you again on the forum calls in September. So thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Hallie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.